Cool. Cool beans. We're getting fancy here. I started going into AI world and I'm like, oh man, I can create some cool stuff in here. Oh, actually, okay, wait, just because that came in, I had a revelation last week. It's not directly correlated to today's the stuff that I'm going to unpack for us today, but I had this revelation, and it's mostly just observing myself, like somebody else said here, like my perfectionist tendency, or like, what is this about? And I'm like observing myself, like, oh, why am I doing this? It seems to be like a question that I'm asking myself, like, why now, or what is this about? Why even do this? Um, I was filming a YouTube video on this last week, and I'm like, this is weird. I'm just speaking into the abyss about A Course in Miracles, and I don't even know if anybody's going to watch this. What am I doing? Uh, and and then this week in particular, and just like I feel like the AI, like we are literally in the midst of a revolution, like the industrial, like agricultural, like technological, and it's like it's literally right in front of us happening right now. And the exponential growth is just absolutely crazy. And I heard Chris Sacco talking about this. He's like, like our minds aren't equipped to think about exponential growth because usually we're looking backwards, but the growth curve is so wild right now that the minute you turn around and look forward, you've just hit the like you're like, oh my gosh, this growth curve is straight up, and our world is changing dramatically very quickly. And but unlike any other time, I feel like this is it's a like an invitation into a spiritual conversation because I start thinking about like AI is going to replace a wild amount of jobs, wild amount of jobs, and even just let's think about this for a second. The pending crisis of identity that is about to happen with people losing their jobs, with people like, who am I? That because like your career is often like a large identity for yourself. And all of a sudden that can be wiped out by AI. And imagine the crisis of identity that is about to fall upon the world. What am I? What do I do? And, uh, and it's going to crack people open to think of things differently. You'll have to. And yeah, I'm just present to that. That we're literally on the brink of this. Like it's happening right now. It's already happening. And I think, yeah. Uh, okay, one other thought around this. I don't know if this will make sense, but I was thinking about like reading a book, right? Like why do I read A Course in Miracles in the morning? I read this book. But with AI and like information coming so quickly, um, I was like, will people read books in the future? Like, why would you read a book if you could get the information in like, a little script or something? And then I was thinking about, oh, but there's two things happening when you read a book. You're getting the information, but you're also developing character. You're also developing your ability to focus. The information is sinking in differently, right? For me, I read A Course in Miracles by listening on audio and reading the words, and it's because I like want it in my being. That's different than just being able to have access to the information of the book. Does that make sense? Now, here, like what AI is doing is AI is allowing us to remove all of the constraint of time and money to focus on developing the character of the self, because we have access to an incredible intelligence now with AI. The only thing that will make it difference is the character that is using it. the self that uses the AI. And so then this has always been the case, but it's like, what is the opportunity? It's like, so by removing the tasks, by creating, using AI and leveraging AI, we're able to create more time for ourselves to develop a deeper character, which is an amazing opportunity. Um, anyways, these are some thoughts of mine that I'm thinking. I like go share my wife. She's like, "That's great, Dan. Can we go get groceries?" Like, what? I don't. Let's bring it back into real life. Um, yeah, can we also pay bills? Exactly. Well, I think that there's going to be just like to wrap up this point, and then we'll talk about the ego. And really, it's about because what we have to develop in this time is like to be great thinkers, to be able to be able to be creators, value creators, and use AI, and not like the people who. Where is the value if all of the things? This is a question that I've been pondering for a long time, that I'm getting a grasp on since AI came out. It's like, well, if AI can do everything, then where is my value? If AI could do everything that I used to do, then where is my value? And I think there's like the value is going to be in humaning, in being a human. And so then like for coaches and people who are experts in nervous system regulation and relationships and like being a human, this is where the opportunity is. Um, and there will be people who who the way I kind of think of it is like when we meditate or we get into even when we're having conversations about this and being able to distinguish the ego, and you become the observer of your thoughts, right? Like that's the game. When you're the observer of your thoughts, you're like, oh, cool, there's that perfectionist tendency. Oh, cool, there's that limiting story. Oh, cool, there's like, but you're not those thoughts. You're like, you're just observing. You're free. And in the same way, if you think of AI is an information, is basically the thought stream that you can either just get wrapped up in the thought stream and not have any like conscious thought of it, or you can be the observer of the thought stream using AI to create amazing things. Like right now, I'm going to show you. I like this would have taken me eons to put together, like this slide deck. But I'm like, oh man, with AI, I did it in like less than an hour. So I'll let you guys be the judge of whether it's better or worse than my scribble on an iPad with my chicken scratch. Um, but anyways, this is so all of that to say, I see a correlation as AI comes more and more online, that for me it will be a course in miracles, but it will just like whatever is the idea. There's a spiritual awakening. There's an opportunity for us to cultivate more connection to a deeper soul, deeper spirit. And AI is like a correlating, activating time. That makes sense. Any of that makes sense? Sometimes I'll just share and not entirely sure. But okay. We got this chat. Okay. So let's talk about this. Understanding the ego and separation, a journey through A Course in Miracles. Today, we're going to talk about exploring the ego's role in creating separation, understanding how to transcend ego patterns, and then how to apply these principles in everyday life. That's the goal. That's what we're up to. And we're talking about this from the lens of pages 43 to 57. So the core ideas there's like many ideas in 10 pages, in 14 pages. So I'm just pulling out 4, right? But you might have some other ones, and that's totally cool. These are the 4 that kind of stuck out to me. So number 1 is there's the ego's illusion of separation. The ego creates a false sense of separation, making us believe that we are separate from God and each other. Yeah? Simple distinction, and we'll unpack these. Okay? Core idea number 2. The ego has a fear-based thought system. So just being able to create the distinction between, oh, this is an ego mind thought, this is a fear-based system thought, and this is a miraculous thought. This is a miracle-minded thought. This is the distinction between scarcity and abundance, being stuck and being free. This is the miracle, right? But in order to be able to have the shift in perception and experience the miracle, you have to be able to distinguish which is which. Third idea is the ego's role in conflict. Okay, so the ego loves conflict, loves it. There's like a few times where I'm having conversations with my wife and I'm trying my best to be the observer of my thoughts. And I'm literally in my head, I'm like, don't say it. Don't, you know that's going to create conflict. Don't you dare say it. And then I'll say it. I'm like, son of a bitch, you knew better. um, the ego loves conflict because the conflict creates an illusion of separation. And lastly, how do we then transcend the ego through miracles? By being able to create miracle mindedness. And it's a practice. It's just a practice. So naturally, I was thinking about my own journey with this book and my own journey through understanding like these ideas. And I have a wild story. I'm going to share a little bit of it here that might, well, I don't know what it's going to do, but I feel like we learn good with stories. I learn best with stories. And if I look at like, how do I apply this? Because this book has been present for this entire journey. But I look at, okay, where in my own life and story have I experienced these thoughts? And maybe this is something for you to think about too. Like where can I see my own ego being separate? Where are my fear-based thought systems coming from? So for me, like the hero's journey, this would be like the call to action. And maybe you've heard this already, but I feel like my initiation into this work or into understanding myself was I went $500,000 into debt at 21 with no idea what I was doing. And the project didn't work that I was going for. And I was riddled with shame and embarrassment about my financial situation. Like just so much so. I never talked about it. I hid it. In fact, I was in the bank so much trying to not go bankrupt that the bank gave me a job. And then ironically, like hilariously, I became a financial advisor with absolutely horrible finances. And it was like a perfect mask situation. I'm wearing a suit, but don't look at my debt. Like hilarious. So the debt and my experience, like everything was fear-based for me. Like it was very present in my experience, right? Fully activated. And because I didn't confront it, and because there was a lack of integrity from the very beginning, it continued to expand, and the fear-based thought system just expanded and got worse for years and years. To the point where I had turned my house into a rental property and I ignored it. I was like a young kid. Don't know anything really about being a landlord or having rental properties. And I was just in fear. And my house turned into a marijuana grow up. So the renters turned it into a grow up. It was covered in black mold. Imagine the guilt and shame and embarrassment at that point. Like, oh my God, what have I done now? It's like even worse. What did I do? I boarded up the house. I paid somebody to mow the lawn and I pretended like renters were in there. And I just pretended. Fast forward a little bit later, turns out like the renter ended up being involved in a very large gang. And so somehow, inadvertently, not intentionally, but they had taken over the house with the grow up, and I had gotten into some relationship where I have gang members as renters. Imagine that. Sticky situation. It was absolutely wild. Like having and no power and no and like absolute fear. You talk about fear. Um, I had no power and I had total fear. But throughout this entire journey, I'm like working with Bob Proctor. I'm doing personal development. I'm reading A Course in Miracles. I'm like, I'm responsible for my situation. I have to take 100% responsibility. It's nobody's fault but my own. What? And I started to like think differently. And it's really easy to be like, oh, like these gang guys or whatever. They're different than whatever. They're just separate than me. But I remember like I had probably 5 or 6 defining conversations with these gang members, like scary situations. But I'm like, okay, I'm going to finally, I had no other choice. I'm like, I need to confront. Like, it would have been so much easier to confront the fear in the very beginning. It would have just been a conversation with the banker. And because I didn't have that conversation, I'm having conversations with gang members in their clubhouses with like big giant dogs. Scary. But I'm also trying to reconcile this idea of like, well, they're also divine beings here on this planet. On some level, we're also connected. On some level, this dude who's a giant Russian guy with a wife beater on is some projection of my own unconscious. It's not like the dude like the Russian. This is a projection of my own unconscious. Well, that's an interesting unraveling. Okay, so and then I started to find similarities. So here was like things like this. I remember this distinction, but it was like these guys, they actually had a very high degree of integrity. If they said they were going to do something, they did it because if they didn't, it in their world they died. And I was like, "Oh, that got that lesson. Okay. Thank you." And I started to be able to negotiate with them. And I started to see them differently. And then they responded to me differently. And inevitably ended up learning a ton of lessons from them and getting out of the house. I ended up selling the house to them. It was not a good deal for me, but I got out of the debt. I removed the relationship and I was free. And in a lot of ways, this was like that debt, which was like 12 years, was the container of my learning. And the debt didn't disappear until I got the learnings, until I could see the whole situation differently, until I took full responsibility, until I could see the divine perfection of it all. And as that became more present for me, it just kind of melted away. Pretty wild, right? Crazy story. So let's see if we can unpack this like these 4 ideas. So the 4 ideas, um, 4 ideas. Number one, the ego's illusion of separation. Okay, so there are, they talk about in the mind, a really easy way of thinking about this is you can either look through the lens of fear and separation or through the lens of unity and love. This is the simplicity of it, right? It's simple, it's not easy. But the more distinction and the more awareness you have of this, the easier it becomes. So the problem that this creates is there's a false sense of isolation and disconnection. So imagine for people who are unaware that they are connected to God, that they are connected to everything, and AI takes their job, or like there's going to be an amplified experience of isolation and disconnection. It's been happening for years and years already, but this is a big problem. Yeah. So the Course in Miracles concept would say the ego is part of the mind that believes that your existence is defined by separation. So that's page 44. And then something that I've been, I don't know, called to do or like inspired to do is to find like I actually opened up my Bible for the first time in like long time because um well, yeah, last week I talked about it, but it's like when I first had this book, it occurred to me because of the way that I was looking at it that it was saying something different than the Bible, but it was my lens. And then so looking at like the point of this book really, or how I am interpreting it, how I experience it, is that the Bible is almost like a historical telling of events. Right? Like, here's what happened, and here's what happened, and most of the first Old Testament books are like just a bunch of names and dates and land masses, and then like a little story with a like, oh yeah, and this happened. Um, and A Course in Miracles is speaking to the ideas in the Bible, but from a context of like from a psychological context that then allows you to interpret the Bible better because of the context that A Course in Miracles is providing. Does that make sense? So, so what's the, where do you find this in the Bible? Oh, my spotlight. Well, and there's lots of scripture verses like this, but it's like, for we are all members of one body. And the idea of like the wave isn't separate from the ocean, right? Like that's the idea. The wave is a wave. It has its own form, but it's not independent of the ocean. And so the shift of thinking through this is that's all this is, right? What are we doing? We're trying to shift our minds. Shifting our minds, move from seeing yourself as separate and isolated to recognizing your inherent connection with others in the world. And in the moment when we were getting started today and we're taking some breaths, close your eyes and you just get present. That is the space. That's the space that's always ever present, that's always ever there, that you have perpetual access to. Do we tune into that or do we not? Do we remember? It's a remembering. You don't even have to do anything. You just have to remember. My kids are 2 and 5. They aren't, they just are. They're not, they're great teachers. So, okay, so, what's a practical step? And it would be similar to the meditation that we did, but just taking 5 minutes occasionally throughout your day to clear out the thoughts. Maybe this is helpful. I do this often in a day. I literally think of my mind like a toilet bowl, and I will just say, flush, bye, and flush all the thinking that's going. Before this call, I was trying to get an ad up on using Facebook ads, and oh my, I was going nuts. It's like, oh, you can't. Anybody ever had that? Trying to get ads up, Facebook, Meta, yeah. And I was just like, oh, okay, well, flush. Probably like I'm probably trying to do the wrong thing at the wrong time. All right, flush. New moment. That's a beautiful thing about a wave too. Another great that nature is telling us all the time. Wave comes in, wave goes out, new wave. It doesn't stop. It's just, oh, new moment. New moment. One of the ways in which the ego creates more separation, and one of the challenges for us is like we're perpetually in a state of worrying and anxiety about the future or the past. But the present moment is like light in a shadow. As soon as light's turned on, the fear-based system doesn't exist. So the problem that this fear-based thought system creates, like I was saying, is like anxiety. So fear and anxiety. And that typically comes from worrying about the future, worrying about something that doesn't exist right now. That's a great example of like, oh, there's my ego. And the ego, it's like one other thing that I'm present to is like the ego isn't bad or wrong. The ego is incredibly useful. The challenge is the ego aligned with higher spirit's will, or is it trying to do its own thing? The ego is a great servant and a horrible master. So what does that mean? It's like, well, can you connect first and then guide? And how do you connect first? You literally just get present. Flush, flush, right here, right now. Oh, okay, cool. Nothing to worry about in this moment. Amazing. Oh, I'm abundant. I'm healthy. I'm alive. Nothing to worry about. Cool. Holy Spirit, reveal yourself. What would you have me say? What would you have me say in this moment? What would you have me do? I surrender. Wild way to live, by the way. Wild way, but amazing. So page 46 says the ego's thought system is based on fear, which we know. And fear, why does fear exist? Well, mostly because it doesn't exist. It's an illusion. The craziness of your own mind. Of just like, oh, this might happen or that might happen, or I need to plan on blah, 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 whatever. None of that is real. So of course you have fear about it. You can't do anything about it. So maybe there's a biblical connection to this idea. Well, there is no fear in love, but perfect love drives out fear. I love that. Perfect love, you don't have to fight it. You don't have to change anything. You literally just has to get present to it, invite it in. In that minute, it drives out fear. You turn on the light, lights on. You ever meet those people that got sparkly eyes? Like lights are on. You're like, oh, yeah. They're just present. Lights are on. There's no, and the opposite is true. You can see it in people's eyes. Which thought system is running the show? So, what's the shift? What is the thing to think about? How do we shift our thinking? Well, the shift from fear to love would be the shift from past and future to present. Peace and acceptance over fear and worry. Yeah, the fear is real. The possible no money, well, not even the possible no money. This is, I'll just speak into this a little bit because it might be real, but like, for example, I have had less than $100 in my bank account and thousands of bills due like the next day or week. Shitty situation. Horrible situation. And I can remember in one particular instance, before I went to bed, I started writing out how fucked I am. And I just started writing out all of the thoughts that were true and real for me. I have $100. I have no clients. I'm screwed. I'm going to have to claim bankruptcy. I'm so embarrassed. I'm going to da 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 da. And I just wrote it out. And then I went back to bed. And then I went to bed. I got it out. I went to bed. I woke up in the morning. I was like, new morning. Hey, God, I'm grateful for. Thank you for this coffee that I have. Thank you for this day. And I just started writing in the journal. And you know what comes through? Some random dude that I have never met before, but comes into my awareness. Um, along with like some ideas that I've never thought of. But I'm just journaling, I'm writing, and I'm literally seeing like some plan or something emerge on my notepad. And I'm like, okay, well, I guess I call that guy. I don't know. I call that guy. Turns out he's randomly in Vancouver. I take the last $100. I hop on a bus. I go meet this guy. On the Monday, I end up with 25 grand in my bank account. What? Would that have happened if I had just stayed in the realness of the fact that I only had $100? No, but I had a miracle. That's a miracle, a literal miracle. Amazing. Yes. And it's like that is what is available all the time, always. But we forget. And it's literally just what are you looking at? Because you can only look at the lens of fear or the lens of love or abundance or God or like they're starkly different. And really what happens is the work or the practice, and I learned this from Bob Proctor, but it's like, will you operate from an external locus of control or an internal one where you look at your bank account and you allow that to influence your thoughts, and then that influences your feelings and your actions and perpetuates the same results that you've always gotten? Or do you have an internal locus of control where you've invited a different way of thinking in that changes the way that you think, that changes the way that you feel, that changes the actions that you take, and your results change? Internal, external locus of control. And I'm not saying that it's easy. And I have a lot of compassion and empathy for the financial struggle. It's why I'm fucking here. And I'll like get emotional talking about it because that was me for so many fucking years. I know it better than anybody else. It sucks, but it doesn't have to be that way. And this is the work that happens first. It, in my experience, maybe there's probably other ways. There's like infinite ways that God is, but okay, does that make sense? Yeah. So, what's a practical step that we might take? How about a fear inventory? Just get out a piece of paper and be like, what are all the things that I have fear of? I'll tell you one that's pending on my list: the CRA. Oh, the tax man. I have fear of that guy, even still. But you identify it and then you go into it. You're like, cool, what's up, fear? You're literally nothing. What's the one action to take? Okay, accountant, tell me what to do. Okay, send you the bank statements. Okay, like you don't think about it. Just do the one next thing that's in front of you. But even if you did nothing else other than take 5 minutes to think about all of the fear thoughts that exist and identify the fear system, it loses its power. Core idea number 3: the ego's role in conflict. I'm convinced that if I never did this work, I would still be in conflict with gang members. Because I would be trying to be right. I would care about my image or trying to look good or something, which I mostly don't care about anymore. You can tell by my beard, it's just getting ridiculous. um, so the ego's role in conflict. The ego's need to be right or to be superior can lead to arguments and misunderstanding. And conflict reinforces the illusion of separation. And usually, the people who are closest to you are the ones who, well, let me reframe that. This is a belief that I have. Take it or leave it. If it's helpful, take it. If it's not, don't. Um, conflict, conflict is one of the greatest gifts that you can have. And it's often really hard, whether it's a conflict with a client or a conflict with a spouse or a conflict with a team member, but they are bringing something to you that is an absolute gift. But it would require you, I have an image in my head and it shows up now and I know exactly what it means every time it does. And it shows up a lot more often than I'd like, but it's a big giant sword. And I'll be in conversation with my wife or with maybe a client, and like the sword just comes into my mind. It's like, fuck, fall on the sword. What are you defending? What are you trying to, what are you doing? And it's it's like, oh man, okay. And it's one of the hardest things to do. But every time I do that, there's more love, there's more peace, there's more connection, and I learn something. And something that had previously kept me separate dissolves. And I learned something about myself, but it's like ultimate humility. And it feels like, the chessboard is here because it's like the ego is the one that is strategizing and manipulating and playing games and like trying to get it, like trying to be right and do all that stuff. Oh, what do we think of these slides? Is this cool? Is this helpful? So on page 50, it says the ego seeks to divide and separate. Its only goal is to create conflict. Join our mastermind, I'll show you. uh, Biblical connection, Matthew 5, verse 9. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God. The ego seeks to divide and separate. Its only goal is to create conflict. But blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God. So what's the mindset shift for this core idea? Well, if we shift from engaging in conflict and need to be right to seeking understanding and harmony, prioritizing empathy and compassion. It's if you prioritize that, and by the way, I am learning. this is a lifelong pursuit for me. It's so easy to get into your own head where you just see things through your own lens. This is the way it is. Take a breath, man. There's a gazillion other points of view. You have one little tiny view through a pinhole. And the minute you can do that, there's so much more spaciousness. There's so much more love. There's so much more compassion. There's so much more abundance. Your relationships will get much better. And tell me that if your relationships got better, you wouldn't make more money. You 1,000,000% would. So, practical step, get into some conflict in practice. That's going to be the best way. Or just look at the last conflict that you've maybe had. Maybe someone in the last little bit where you've had a conflict. Maybe there's a conversation to have. Maybe there's a sword to fall on. Because this is why the primary work of A Course in Miracles is forgiveness. The primary goal of this book and this work that we're doing is forgiveness. When we can forgive our own mind, when we can forgive our own projections, when we can forgive other people, we create the space for love to emerge. Totally. Yeah. Conflict isn't something to be, I used to hate conflict. And I had a weird idea of like what it meant to be a peacemaker. like a young version of myself, the way that I peace made as a young kid growing up is I was like the class clown. And so I could ease tension, which is like not really peacemaking. It's like diverting or ignoring, or a peacemaker is brave as hell. A peacemaker stands into the conflict and isn't afraid of it, which again, this is a Course in Miracles for online entrepreneurs and business people. If you're going to be good in business, you have to be good with conflict. You have to be good at navigating different ideas and worldviews and people. Okay, last idea, transcending the ego through miracles. So miracles are the means by which we transcend the ego's illusions, which is the shift from fear to love. Right? Biblical connection, Romans 12, verse 2. Do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the reviewing of your mind. I love it. I've got only a few minutes, so I'm keeping this one a little bit short. But the basic idea, right, of all of this is, how do we transcend from a fear-based thought system to a miracle mind that is abundant, that is free, that experiences miracles regularly on the daily? And it is by first being able to distinguish which mind is which voice is which. You guys ever had that challenge? You're like, I think that was God, or maybe that was me. Which one? Who's who? Well, the better you get at this distinction, the more you'll be able to hear the still quiet voice of God. It's usually the quiet one. It's usually underneath. Something that I'm not going to go into deeply here, but this is maybe like the underlying big mountain of an idea, is that we're talking about perception, right? So perception, you have a choice of choosing between fear and between love. So this is a choice. But perception is not required when you know. Perception is a choice of like, which lens will I use? But in the knowing of your creator, of the space, there is no need for choice of perception. You're just in the knowing. So perception is temporary, knowledge is certain and unchanging. Perceptions are like fog against the mountain that is always ever there. So perception varies, and knowledge is rooted in eternal truth, in the changeless. And it's kind of like, I think it was Ram Dass, but he's like, somebody asked him, like, do you believe in God? He's like, no. Why would I believe in God? I know God. When you know God, you don't have to believe because you know. When you're connected to that deep-rooted, unchanging field, you don't have to worry too much about shifting your perceptions, because every perception that you shift is temporary. Biblical connections, Corinthians, for now we see only a reflection as in a mirror, and then we shall see face to face. Like mist on a mountain. Practical step in this is the same, is simply just inviting and connecting with, making contact with the eternal essence of your soul. In whatever way you might do that for you. Maybe it's an ice bath. Maybe it's a sauna. Maybe it's a meditation. Maybe it's reading a book. In conclusion, perception is a choice. True perception sees unity. True perception looks beyond appearances. True perception reveals miracles. Here's a couple reflection questions for you this week. What's one area in your life where you've been relying too much on physical sight? Was this the same reflection as last week? This is the same. These are not, we have new reflection questions. Ignore these ones. I'll have new ones in the thread. Here's my invitation. I'm still getting used to like how long these take and how this is going to flow. I would love to have these be shorter and then Q&A at the end. Today, not so much. But I would love to continue the conversation in the community. So in the thread, in the post that is in the school community, share your thoughts. What are your questions? What'd you get? What'd you like? What'd you learn? What'd you catch? Engage with each other. The more we engage with each other and enroll each other in this way of thinking and having conversation, the more this way of thinking will land in your way of being. Cool. All right. Cool beans. Thanks for being here. Look forward to jamming next week. Let's start a conversation in school. Peace out, everybody. Have a great week. Bye-bye.